This is Spectrum.
Alternative medicine, homeopathy, secret society, hypnosis, the paranormal, alternative energy, UFO, abduction, the weird, the wild, and the wonderful.
With your hosts, Tom Theophanis and Scott Jordan.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Spectrum Radio Network on BBS Radio 2. I'm Scott Jordan, here with my co-host, Tom Theophanis, and remember, there's no such thing as too much information. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm good. Well, today we have a great guest. His name is Dr. George Steinfeld. He's a Ph.D., and he has been practicing psychology in Connecticut for over 40 years. He is highly trained in human behavior and is an approved clinical supervisor in marriage and family therapy. Dr. Steinfeld takes a holistic approach in helping and relieving suffering in the quickest and most effective way possible. He has worked in mental hospitals, child guidance clinics, prisons with addicted inmates, and has his own private practice. Dr. Steinfeld has over 40 professional publications and has given many local, state, and national presentations. Welcome, George.
Oh, welcome. Thank you.
Hey, George, how you doing?
Okay, Scott.
Well, so we're going to have plenty of questions for you today.
Okay. I hope I can answer them in some appropriate and rational manner. I'll do my best.
Okay. Maybe I'll let Scott start off.
Sure. I want to know. I want to know about his evolution in the practice. If there's been some multiple changes through his life and the way he's approached clinical psychology and working with patients.
Okay. I'd be happy to address that. Yeah, if you would have told me that I would be doing what I'm doing now with clients, I do not call them patients, I call them clients.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is they hire me to perform a service, and if I don't do it, they can fire me. So that's I used to call people patients. I don't do that anymore.
Right.
Okay. So I started out at Yeshiva University for my clinical training, and then I interned at Fairfield Hills Hospital. And I like to tell the story of what happened at Fairfield Hills Hospital because it was a turning point in my life.
Okay.
When I came to Fairfield Hills Hospital in Connecticut in September of 1964, my first patient was a very disturbed, called then schizophrenic girl who, would see hallucinations, and she had all sorts of delusions, etc. I worked with her for 5 years, 3 times a week. At the end of the 5 years, she made absolutely no progress. I was being supervised by the biggest supervisors in the field at that time. I was trained in analytic psychotherapy, and my supervisors really had no answers for how to help this young 17-year-old girl. So I started to question whether or not it was me or it was the model that I was applying to try to understand and help this very young and disturbed young lady. Joan, her name was. Joanne.
Okay.
So here I am 3 times a week sitting with this person, trying to really understand, and I tried everything that I knew at that time, and nothing seemed to help her overcome her delusions and hallucinations. And my supervisors, all they could say to me was, she's a very disturbed person, it takes a long time, all of what we called, or I subsequently came to call, bullshit. This was the party line, okay, because our field in 1964 had nothing to offer other than sitting and listening and interpreting things.
So that's what you say when you can't actually help anyone. When
Right.
you can't help someone, you just say, well, they're very disturbed, it takes a long time.
That's one of the bullshit stories in our field, okay? So then what happened is I said, wait a second, there must be another way that I had not been exposed to during my training. So I picked up 4 books. One was called The Strategies of Psychotherapy by Jay Haley, a very famous family therapist, brilliant guy. I picked up the book called Asylums by a guy named Goffman, who talked about total institutions. I'll get to that in a few minutes. It was suggested to me that I read that book when I was in graduate school by my social psychologist, and I started to read it. I said, this has nothing to do with me. A few years later, I'm devouring this book. The other book I read was Reality Therapy by Glasser, and the probably one of the most biggest influences on my life was a book by Thomas Zaz at Syracuse University, psychiatrist, who wrote The Myth of Mental Illness, and where he talks about diagnosis being really a political story that we tell, has nothing to do with what's going on inside the person. When I started to read these things and realized there were other ways, I started to apply them to the, I call them patients at that time, to the people I was working with in the back wards of the mental hospital. And so that was, I was there from 64 to the end of 69, 1970. In about 1968, we started to question all of the practices at the hospital. We felt that patients weren't being treated with the dignity and humanity that we felt was the essence of mental health. And so we embarked on a 2-year battle with the administration for patients' rights. Back in the 60s, everything about rights was going on at that time. And so we felt that the patients weren't represented and had no power. And so we said, has to be, we need to do something about that. Of course, that led to a big battle with the administration. The American Civil Liberties Union came in. We hit the newspapers. We were not prepared for this because we weren't interested in any political thing. We felt that patients weren't being treated right. And so it led to a big investigation, a two-year investigation supported by the Connecticut Psychologist for Social Action. No one else supported the 3 of us. We were 3 guys that were fighting this fight. And we were ostracized by the community of other psychologists. The American Psychological Association didn't help us. The Connecticut Psychological Association didn't help us. The only people that supported our work was a local mental health association. And so we, on which was a newspaper publisher. He came in to do a report. Then an investigation took place, and we got rid of the superintendent. Okay, for which we received the Mental Health Bell Award from the state, one of the highlights of my life.
So they awarded you after ignoring you.
Well, the state Mental Health Association did after they ignored us, and the investigation took place and validated everything that we were saying. We were documenting everything.
Okay.
And so, but after that, I couldn't get a job because I was a whistleblower.
Oh, yeah.
You know what happens with whistle. I couldn't get a job, so I wanted to leave the hospital at that time. They wanted us to stay and rebuild and all of that crap. So I called my friend Marty Rosmarin, who I'd interned with. He was at the Clifford Beers clinic, and I told him my story. He contacted his director, who contacted a woman named Gloria Schaefer, who was a state rep. She got me some grant money, so I was able to leave the hospital and still be able to earn a living. And so I did that for about 1 or 2 years. And then I went to the prison so that I could work with narcotic residents in a therapeutic community. So that is part of my transition. And my prison work was very exciting, which if you want to know about, I'll be happy to tell you.
Absolutely. Unless Tom has any questions, I want to know about the prison work.
Let's go with that first. Yes.
Okay, so I go to the prison because I wanted to work in a therapeutic community. A therapeutic community was really developed in England by a guy named Maxwell Jones, who worked in a collaborative way with patients in a community-based or in a home where everybody was open to discussion. So I wanted that experience. Nothing was happening in Connecticut except in the prison. There was a therapeutic community. I had never worked with narcotic addicts except a little bit at the hospital. I never worked in a therapeutic community. I went into the hospital. I went into the prison as a director of one of the units, and I was in a totally new environment that blew my mind. Okay, I was scared. My first day is like amazing. My first day, I was sitting in a group because the groups were ongoing. I was in like 15 groups a week when I was working there. But this is my first day. I'd introduced myself to the staff, and they asked me all sorts of questions about why I'm working in prisons, etc. I told them the same story I'm telling you. And then I went into a group. So I'm sitting in a group, and I was used to doing groups a certain way at the hospital. So I'm listening to the interaction of the residents in the therapeutic community, all hardcore narcotic addicts, heroin addicts. And I ask a question to one of the inmates, at which point a young narcotic addict kid raises his hand and says, and the leader, in a therapeutic community, anybody could be a leader. Could be a resident, could be a staff member, could be me. So the leader says, "Hey, Guns, let's call him Raphael." I don't want to say his name, but Raphael, what have you got to say? You're raising your hand. He says, "I got some feelings about Steinfeld," which was me. This is my first day in the group. At which point, the guy says, "Well, get your feelings off." He starts yelling at me for about an hour. About how stupid I was, that I was killing the resident. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I was it took me 6 months of nightmares. I would wake up with nightmares because I couldn't understand this approach. It was new to me. It took me 6 months to finally catch on to what was going on in this therapeutic community. Once I caught on and understood what they were trying to do, it was a great experience. I worked there for 5.5 years. I got involved during my work at the prison. I got involved in transactional analysis, which was another treatment approach. And I got involved with the spiritual approach, which I was introduced to by an inmate, one of the residents. Great story. You want to hear the story about how I got involved with Ram Dass, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, Ram Dass he's a legend, right?
He's a legend, right? So I'm doing my work in the therapeutic community, doing whatever I know, learning whatever I can about the guys, etc. And this guy, Joe, who I've been trying to locate for 40 years now because I love him, he says, "Hey, Doc, they're taking us out down to Danbury. Taking us out at a sort of, they're able to take us out to go to a meeting." I said, well, what's the meeting about, Joe? He said, well, this guy, Swami Satchidananda, right, is coming to give a talk. He's a yogi. At which point I said, who the fuck is Swami Satchidananda? I never heard of him, etc. I said, Joe, of course, everybody in prisons are paranoid. So I said, Joe, are you trying to get out of something in the upstairs? Are you trying to get out of something?
He might have been trying to get out of some work.
Yeah, he was trying to get. I thought
a day off.
Because I was paranoid just like everybody else. I didn't trust anybody of these guys. So he said, and he just looked me in the eye and said, Doc, I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy this. So my wife and I went down and we had an evening with Swami Satchidananda.